The blood on Willow Van Doren's hands wouldn't wash away no matter how hard she scrubbed in the creek behind the boarding house, and she knew that even if the stains disappeared from her skin, they would never leave her soul. Her mother had died 3 hours ago in the dusty room they shared in Hachita, New Mexico, coughing up blood until her lungs finally gave out, and Willow had been powerless to stop it. The year was 1883, and consumption took whoever it wanted, but that knowledge didn't make the guilt any lighter. She had been the one to insist they make the journey west from Missouri, promising her mother a better life in the dry climate. And instead, she had delivered her to an early grave in a town so small, it barely had a name on most maps: Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed when Willow returned. "I need this month's rent by tomorrow, or you'll have to find somewhere else to stay. I can't be running a charity, girl. My mother just died." Willow's voice came out flat, emptied of everything. "And I'm sorry for your loss, truly I am, but sorry doesn't pay bills." Mrs. Henderson's face softened slightly. "Look, I'll give you 3 days. That's the best I can do." Willow nodded and climbed the narrow stairs to the room that now held only her mother's body and the few possessions they owned. A neighbor woman had already laid her mother out properly, hands folded across her chest, but Willow couldn't bring herself to look at the peaceful expression on that waxen face. She sank onto her own thin mattress and stared at the cracked ceiling. 20 years old, alone in a territory that felt as foreign as the moon, with exactly $4.30 to her name, and no family left anywhere in the world. The funeral the next day cost $3. Willow stood alone at the grave as the preacher said words she didn't hear, and when it was over, she walked back to town with $1.30 in her pocket and nowhere to go. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Hachita, and she felt every eye in town watching her, judging her, seeing her for what she truly was: a burden who had dragged her dying mother across half the country for nothing. She found herself standing outside the Silver Star Saloon as the afternoon shadows grew longer. Inside, she could hear men laughing and glasses clinking. She had never set foot in such a place, but respectable work for women in Hachita was scarce, and she was out of options. Before she could talk herself out of it, she pushed through the swinging doors. The noise dimmed as heads turned toward her. The bartender, a heavy man with a graying mustache, raised an eyebrow. "We don't serve ladies here, miss. I'm not here to drink, I'm looking for work." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. What kind of work? His tone made it clear what he assumed. Anything. Cleaning, cooking, washing dishes. I can work hard. A rough laugh came from one of the tables. "Hear that, boys? She can work hard." Willow's face burned, but she kept her chin up. "I'm serious. I need employment." The bartender studied her for a long moment. "I don't need help. Try the restaurant down the street or maybe one of the ranches outside town." She left quickly, ignoring the comments that followed her out. The restaurant wasn't hiring. Neither was the general store, the hotel, or the telegraph office. By the time the sun was setting, Willow had knocked on every door in Hachita and received the same answer everywhere: "No work available, sorry miss. Times are hard." She spent that night on a bench outside the telegraph office, curled up with her arms wrapped around herself, trying not to think about how hungry she was or how cold the desert became after dark. When dawn came, she was still there, watching the pink light spread across the mountains in the distance. "You look like you could use some coffee." Willow jerked upright. A man stood a few feet away, holding 2 tin cups. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty riding clothes and a gun belt slung low on his hips, and something about the way he carried himself suggested he knew exactly how to use that weapon. "I don't have money for coffee," Willow said quietly. "Didn't ask if you did." He held out one of the cups. When she hesitated, he added, "It's just coffee, nothing more, nothing less." She took it, too tired and cold to refuse. The first sip burned her tongue, but the warmth that spread through her chest was worth it. "Thank you." He sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Vincent Owens. Most people call me Vince. Willow Van Doren." She took another sip, letting the silence stretch. "You're the girl whose mother died yesterday. Word travels fast in small towns." His voice was gentle, not prying. "You got somewhere to stay?" "Not anymore." "Family?" "None left." He nodded slowly, staring out at the dusty street. "I run a ranch about 5 miles north of here. The Double O. It's not much, but it's mine. I could use someone to help with the house and cooking. My last housekeeper left 2 months ago to get married, and I've been making do on my own, but I'm a terrible cook and an even worse housekeeper." Willow turned to look at him properly. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "Because I know what it's like to be alone with nowhere to go." He met her eyes steadily. "I'm offering honest work for honest pay. You'd have your own room, meals included, and $30 a month. I'm gone most days working the cattle, so you'd have the house to yourself. If you're worried about propriety, my foreman lives in the bunkhouse with 3 ranch hands, so there's other people around." It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. "What's the real reason you're offering this?" Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Let's just say I don't like seeing people suffer when I can do something about it. You need work, I need help. Seems straightforward to me." Willow thought about spending another night on the bench, about going hungry for another day, about the empty room in the boarding house that she couldn't afford anymore. She thought about her mother's last words. "Don't let bitterness make you afraid of kindness." "All right," she said. "I'll take the job." They left town an hour later, after Willow collected her few belongings from Mrs. Henderson. Vincent had a wagon with supplies loaded in the back, and he helped her up onto the seat before climbing up beside her. The ride north was quiet except for the creak of wagon wheels and the steady clip of the horses' hooves. The Double O Ranch appeared gradually as they crested a low rise. It wasn't grand, but it was solid. A main house built from adobe and wood, a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals and grazing land that stretched toward the mountains. Willow could see cattle scattered across the range, and a few men working near the barn looked up as the wagon approached. "Home," Vincent said simply. He introduced her to the foreman, a weathered man named Sam who nodded politely, and to the ranch hands, Miguel, Tom, and a young man called Red because of his hair. They all treated her with careful respect, tipping their hats and welcoming her. The house was exactly as Vincent had described, functional but neglected. Dust covered most surfaces, dishes were piled in the dry sink, and the floors hadn't been swept in weeks. But it had good bones, with thick walls that would keep out the heat and a fireplace for cold nights. "Your room's through there." Vincent pointed to a door off the main living area. "It's got a bed and a dresser. Not fancy, but private. The well's out back, and there's a root cellar for food storage. You'll find everything you need in the kitchen. I usually eat breakfast before dawn and supper after dark, but don't worry about lunch. I'm usually too busy to come in for it." Willow set her small bag down and looked around. "This is more than fair." "Good." He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "I should get back to work." "Make yourself at home, Miss Van Doren." "Willow. You can call me Willow," he nodded. "Willow it is, and I'm just Vince." After he left, Willow stood in the middle of the kitchen and felt something unexpected, a tiny spark of hope. It wasn't much, barely a flicker, but it was more than she'd felt in weeks. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time Vince came in for supper that evening, the house had been transformed. The floors were swept, the dishes cleaned and put away, the windows scrubbed until they actually let in light. The smell of cooking filled the air. Beans, cornbread, and salt pork, nothing fancy but hot and filling. Vince stopped in the doorway and stared. I didn't expect all this. You're paying me to keep house. This is keeping house. Willow ladled beans onto 2 plates. They ate in silence at first, the awkwardness of 2 strangers sharing a meal. But gradually, Vince started talking about the ranch, about the cattle he was raising and the challenges of the dry season. Willow found herself asking questions, genuinely interested, and he answered with patience. "How long have you had this place?" she asked. 4 years. Bought it with money I'd saved working as a drover. It was pretty run down when I got it, but I've been fixing it up bit by bit." He paused. "I grew up on a ranch in Texas. Lost my folks when I was 16 to a fever that swept through the area. Spent a few years drifting, trying to figure out what to do with myself. Finally realized I wanted what my parents had, land, livestock, something to build. I'm sorry about your parents. And I'm sorry about your mother." His gray eyes were kind. "Grief is a strange thing. Some days it's bearable, and some days it hits you like a stampede." Willow looked down at her plate. "I killed her. I might as well have pulled a trigger." "What do you mean?" The words spilled out before she could stop them. "She was sick before we left Missouri. Not as bad, but sick. The doctor said the journey might kill her, but I insisted. I was so sure the dry air out here would help, so convinced I knew better than everyone else. I dragged her across the country and she got worse every day, and I wouldn't turn back because I was too stubborn to admit I'd made a mistake. She died because of me." Vince set down his fork. "That's not true. You don't understand." "I understand that consumption kills people no matter where they are. I understand that you were trying to help your mother, not hurt her. And I understand that carrying that kind of guilt will eat you alive if you let it." His voice was firm but not harsh. "You didn't kill her, Willow. The sickness did. Everyone I've ever gotten close to ends up worse off." Willow's throat tightened. "My father died when I was 12. My mother spent years taking care of me when I should have been taking care of her. Now she's dead and I'm here and I'm just a burden to everyone I meet." Vince was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You've been here less than a day, and already this place feels more like a home than it has in months. You're not a burden, Willow. You're a blessing." She looked up at him, startled by the conviction in his voice. "I mean it," he continued. "I know you don't believe it right now, but maybe give yourself time to see it." Something in Willow's chest loosened, just a fraction. She didn't believe him, not really, but the fact that he'd said it mattered more than she wanted to admit. The days fell into a pattern. Willow rose before dawn to make breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and organizing, and devoted her afternoons to cooking and mending. Vince worked from sunrise to sunset, coming in only for meals, always dusty and tired but never complaining. They talked more each day, awkwardness giving way to comfortable conversation. 2 weeks after Willow arrived, a neighbor rancher named Mr. Callahan stopped by with his wife, Mrs. Callahan's eyes sharpened when she saw Willow, and her questions came fast and pointed. Where was Willow from? What was her arrangement here? Was she aware of how it looked, a young woman living in a bachelor's home? "Miss Van Doren is my housekeeper," Vince said, his voice cool. "She has her own quarters, and my foreman and ranch hands are here as well. There's nothing improper about the arrangement." Mrs. Callahan sniffed. "I'm sure that's what you believe, Mr. Owens, but people talk." After they left, Willow felt the weight of those words settling on her shoulders. "Maybe I should look for work in town." "Do you want to leave?" Vince asked. No, but I don't want to damage your reputation. My reputation can handle it. The question is whether you're happy here. Willow thought about the quiet comfort of the house, the satisfaction of work well done, the evening conversations that had become the highlight of her days. I'm happier than I've been in a long time. Then stay. Let people talk. We know the truth. But the encounter had reminded Willow of the precariousness of her position. She was dependent on Vince's goodwill, living in his house, eating his food, taking his money. If he decided she was more trouble than she was worth, she would be back where she started, alone and destitute. That fear manifested in small ways. She worked harder, longer hours, taking on tasks that weren't necessary. She barely touched the money he paid her, squirreling it away in case she needed to leave suddenly. She kept a careful distance during their evening conversations, reminding herself not to get too comfortable, too attached. Vince noticed, though he didn't comment at first. But one evening in early October, when Willow was scrubbing the kitchen floor for the second time that week, he gently took the brush from her hands. "Sit down," he said, "please." She obeyed, confused. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You're running yourself ragged. The house is cleaner than it's been in years. You don't have to work yourself to death to justify being here. I want to earn my keep." "You do earn your keep, more than earn it." He leaned forward. "What are you so afraid of?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not afraid." "You are. I see it in your eyes every time someone from town visits, every time I come home later than expected. You're waiting for me to tell you to leave." Willow's hands twisted in her lap. "Why wouldn't I be? I'm just your housekeeper. You could decide tomorrow that you don't need me and there's nothing I could do about it." "Is that really what you think? That you're just a housekeeper to me?" Her heart started beating faster. "What else would I be?" Vince ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated and uncertain. "I don't know how to say this without sounding like a fool, but these past weeks, having you here talking to you every day, it's been the best part of my life. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make this house feel like a home instead of just a place I sleep. And I know it's probably too soon and you probably don't feel the same way, but I need you to know that you matter to me. Not as a housekeeper, as a person, as someone I care about deeply." Willow stared at him, unable to form words. "I'm not asking for anything," Vince said quickly. "I just need you to stop being afraid that I'm going to throw you out. Even if you left tomorrow to take another job, I'd help you. But I hope you won't leave because He trailed off, shaking his head. "I'm making a mess of this." "You care about me," Willow said slowly. "Yes. More than as a housekeeper. Much more." She should have been panicking. She should have been pulling away, protecting herself, remembering that she was a burden who brought nothing but trouble to people who got close to her. But instead, she heard herself saying, "I care about you too. I've been trying not to because it seemed dangerous, but I do." Vince's whole face changed, hope lighting his features. "You do? I think about you all day. I look forward to supper not because of the food, but because it means I get to talk to you. When you smile at something I say, it feels like the sun coming out." The confession spilled out of her in a rush. "But I'm still terrified, Vince, because everyone I care about ends up hurt or dead, and I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm. "Life doesn't work that way, Willow. Bad things don't happen because you exist. Your father didn't die because of you. Your mother didn't die because of you. Those were tragedies, but they weren't your fault." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I see who you are, kind, hardworking, thoughtful, strong. You're not a curse. You're a gift." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're my greatest blessing." Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks before she could stop them. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said anything so purely kind to her, had seen her as something other than a problem to be solved or a burden to be endured. Vince came around the table and pulled her into his arms, and she let herself collapse against his chest, crying for her mother, for her father, for all the years of believing she was worthless. He held her through it all, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances. When the tears finally subsided, Willow pulled back slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Don't be." He wiped her cheeks with his thumbs. "You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to feel." She looked up at him, at the genuine concern in his gray eyes, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe she wasn't cursed. Maybe she deserved kindness after all. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then let me prove it to you. Stay. Not as my housekeeper, but as someone I'm courting. If you'll have me, we'll take it slow. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing where it leads." Willow's breath caught. "You want to court me?" "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." She thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea, all the ways it could go wrong. But she also thought about how alive she felt when she was with him, how he made her believe she might actually have a future worth living. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." His smile was brighter than the desert sun. True to his word, Vince courted her slowly and carefully. He brought her wildflowers from the range. He taught her to ride his gentlest mare so she could explore the land around the ranch. On Sundays, they would pack a lunch and ride out to a creek that ran along the northern edge of his property, spending the afternoon talking and laughing in the shade of cottonwood trees. The ranch hands noticed the change and approved. Miguel started calling Willow Senora with a knowing smile. Sam told Vince he'd never seen him so happy. Even Red, the youngest hand, seemed pleased by the obvious affection growing between them. Willow still had moments of doubt, times when the old fears crept back in. But Vince was patient, always ready to reassure her, always consistent in his care. He never made her feel foolish for her worries, never dismissed her feelings. Instead, he listened and understood and helped her work through each wave of anxiety. In November, a bad storm hit the region. Lightning struck the barn, starting a fire that could have destroyed everything. Vince and the ranch hands fought the flames while Willow ran back and forth with buckets of water, her dress soaked, her lungs burning from smoke. They managed to save the barn, though part of the roof was gone. Afterward, as they stood surveying the damage, Willow felt the familiar guilt rising. "If I hadn't been here, maybe you would have noticed the storm sooner. Maybe you could have prevented this." Vince turned to her, soot-streaked and exhausted. "If you hadn't been here, we might not have saved it at all. You worked as hard as any of us. This wasn't your fault, Willow." It was lightning, random chance, nature. But what if, no what ifs? He cupped her face in his dirty hands. "You're not responsible for every bad thing that happens in the world. Sometimes terrible things just happen and we deal with them together. That's what partners do." "Partners," she echoed. "That's what I'm hoping we can be, in everything." The weeks after the fire were hard. Money was tight while they repaired the barn and winter was coming. But Willow found herself settling into the challenge rather than crumbling under it. She stretched their food supplies with careful planning. She helped where she could with repairs. And when Vince came in each night exhausted and discouraged, she was there to remind him that they would get through it. They did get through it. By early December, the barn was repaired and even improved. The cattle were healthy. The winter rains came right on schedule, promising good grazing in the spring. On Christmas Eve, Vince asked Willow to take a walk with him. They bundled up against the cold and headed to the creek, now running high with rainwater. The moon was full, casting silver light across the landscape. "I have something for you," Vince said. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket. Willow's heart started pounding as she opened it. Inside was a ring, simple gold with a small turquoise stone. "It's not fancy," Vince said, "but turquoise is supposed to bring protection and good fortune. I thought maybe it would help remind you that good things can happen too." "Vince, marry me, Willow. Be my wife, my partner, my family. Build this life with me. I love you. I've loved you since the day I saw you on that bench, looking lost and brave all at once. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you're not a burden, that you're precious and valued and loved beyond measure." Willow looked at the ring, at his hopeful face, at the land spreading around them. 6 months ago, she had been destitute and alone, convinced she brought nothing but misery to the world. Now she stood on solid ground, looking at a future that promised happiness and love. "I love you too," she said. "And yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. They were married in January of 1884 in the small church in Hatchita, with Sam as best man and Mrs. Henderson, surprisingly enough, as Willow's attendant. The boarding house owner had softened after learning about the engagement, admitting that she'd always felt guilty about turning Willow out during her darkest hour. "You've done well for yourself, Mrs. Henderson said as she helped Willow into a simple white dress that they'd ordered from a catalog. "Mr. Owens is a good man. The best," Willow agreed. The ceremony was short and sweet. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vince kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and Willow finally, truly believed it. Their first year of marriage was full of adjustments and challenges. The ranch demanded constant work and money was often tight. But they faced everything together, learning to communicate, to compromise, to support each other through the hard times. Willow discovered she had a talent for managing the ranch's finances, keeping meticulous records that helped them plan for the future. Vince discovered he enjoyed teaching her about ranching, and she proved an eager student, learning to rope and brand and doctor sick cattle. They also learned each other in quieter ways. Vince learned that Willow loved to read and would sometimes save for months to buy a new book. Willow learned that Vince had nightmares about the fever that killed his parents and needed to be held until they passed. They learned how to fight fair, how to apologize, how to forgive. In the spring of 1885, Willow realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked Vince, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if—" "You'll be an amazing mother," Vince interrupted gently. "And yes, things could go wrong. But they could also go beautifully right. We'll handle whatever comes together." The pregnancy was difficult. Willow was sick for the first 3 months and exhausted for most of the rest. But Vince was endlessly patient, taking over more of the household work, bringing her water and crackers when she couldn't keep anything else down, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. On a cold December morning, Willow went into labor. Mrs. Henderson came to help, along with a midwife from a nearby ranch. Vince paced outside for hours, nearly wearing a groove in the floorboards until finally he heard the thin wail of a newborn. "It's a boy," the midwife announced, opening the door with a smile. "A healthy boy, and your wife did wonderfully." Vince rushed inside to find Willow propped up in bed, looking exhausted and radiant all at once, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly. He took the baby carefully, awed by the tiny perfect features, the miniature fingers that gripped his thumb with surprising strength. "He's beautiful. You're both beautiful." They named him William after Willow's father and called him Will. He had Willow's dark hair and Vince's gray eyes, and from the start, he had a sunny disposition that brightened the entire ranch. Willow had been terrified that she would be a terrible mother, but the opposite proved true. She was patient and loving, attentive to Will's needs but not smothering. Watching her with their son, Vince fell in love with her all over again. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Vince made smart decisions about breeding and selling cattle, and Willow's careful financial management meant they were able to expand their land holdings. They hired more hands and built a larger bunkhouse. The Double O became known as one of the most successful ranches in the territory. In 1888, their second child was born, a daughter they named Rose. She had Vince's dark hair and Willow's blue eyes and a stubborn streak a mile wide. Where Will was easygoing, Rose was fierce and determined, insisting on following her father and brother everywhere as soon as she could walk. Willow had worried that she wouldn't have enough love for two children, but she discovered that love multiplied rather than divided. Each child was precious and unique, and she treasured them both. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, cattle lost to disease or predators, accidents and illnesses that kept them up at night. But through it all, Willow and Vince held firm to each other and the life they'd built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1894, Vince took Willow back to the creek where he'd proposed. Will, now 8 and Rose, now 6, stayed with Sam and his wife, giving their parents a rare afternoon alone. "You ever regret it?" Willow asked as they sat in the shade of the cottonwoods, the water babbling peacefully nearby. "Taking in a desperate stranger all those years ago?" Vince laughed and pulled her close. "Not for a single second. You're still my greatest blessing, Willow. You always will be." She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sunlight dance on the water. "I used to think I was nothing but a burden to everyone I met. That I brought nothing but trouble and grief. And now I know that I was wrong. I bring love, I bring family, I bring a full life to the people who matter most to me." She turned to look up at him. "You taught me that. You saw worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself." "You always had worth. I just helped you recognize it." He kissed her forehead. "We saved each other, I think. I was existing, not living, before you came along. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to build something lasting." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the easy quiet of two people who knew each other completely. Finally, Willow said, "I'm pregnant again." Vince sat up straight. "You are 3 months along, I think. I wanted to be sure before I told you." His whoop of joy startled birds from the nearby trees. He picked her up and spun her around carefully, both of them laughing. "Another blessing," he said when he set her down. "We're overflowing with blessings." "We really are," Willow agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Their third child, a boy they named Samuel after the foreman who had become like family, was born in the spring of 1895. By then, the ranch was so prosperous that they were able to build an addition onto the house, giving each child their own room and adding a proper parlor for entertaining. The children grew up strong and happy, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with ranch work as soon as they were able, and absorbing the values their parents lived by. Hard work, integrity, compassion, and the understanding that family was everything. Will grew into a thoughtful young man who loved books as much as his mother did, often reading to his younger siblings in the evenings. Rose became an accomplished rider who could rope and brand as well as any of the ranch hands, much to her father's pride. Little Sam was the peacemaker of the family, always quick with a joke or a hug when tensions ran high. As the years passed, Willow sometimes thought about that desperate girl who had sat on a bench in Hatchita, convinced she had nothing to offer the world. It felt like remembering a different person entirely. She had become someone she never imagined she could be. A successful ranch wife, a loving mother, a woman of substance and respect in the community. But more than any of that, she had become someone who knew her own worth, who understood that her existence mattered, that she brought light and love into the world simply by being herself. The Double O Ranch continued to thrive. Vince and Willow added more land, more cattle, and eventually branched out into horses as well. Will showed an aptitude for breeding and training, and by the time he was 18, he was running that part of the operation with skill and confidence. Rose, at 16, was already being courted by half the young men in the territory, though she showed little interest in settling down. "There's too much world to see," she told her mother. "Too much to do. Maybe someday I'll get married, but not yet." Willow understood completely. She had married young, but circumstances had been different. She wanted her daughter to have choices, to explore life on her own terms. Sam, at 14, was still figuring out what he wanted. He loved the ranch, but also talked about becoming a doctor or a lawyer, professions that would require education back east. Willow and Vince encouraged him to dream big, promising they would find a way to support whatever path he chose. In 1903, on their 19th wedding anniversary, Willow and Vince stood on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children were grown, or nearly so. The ranch was more successful than they'd ever dreamed. They had built something lasting and good. "You remember the day we met?" Willow asked, her hand in Vince's. "Every detail. You looked so lost and so brave at the same time. I knew I had to help you. I thought you were crazy for offering a stranger a job. I was certain there had to be a catch. The only catch was that I was already half in love with you." He squeezed her hand. "Best decision I ever made, offering you that coffee. Best decision I ever made, accepting it." She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the absolute security of being loved and valued. "I spent so long believing I was worthless, that I brought nothing but pain to the people around me. And then you showed me the truth, that I was always worth loving. I just needed someone patient enough to prove it to me." "We proved it to each other," Vince said. "I needed you just as much as you needed me." In the distance, they could hear Will calling the horses in for the night, Rose laughing at something Sam said. The sounds of a family going about the comfortable routines of life. It was an ordinary moment, unremarkable in its simplicity, and yet it held everything that mattered. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Will eventually married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a smart woman named Elizabeth who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the northern section of the Double O land and started raising their own children, ensuring the ranch would continue into the next generation. Rose, true to her independent spirit, spent several years traveling before finally settling down with a schoolteacher from Santa Fe. They split their time between the ranch and the city. Rose never quite able to stay away from the land she loved for too long. Sam did go east for school, becoming a doctor just as he'd dreamed. But he returned to New Mexico to practice, opening a clinic in Hachita that served ranchers and townsfolk alike. He married a nurse he met during his training, and they raised their family in town while remaining close with the ranch family. Willow and Vince watched their children build their own lives with pride and satisfaction. They had given their children what they themselves had fought for: security, love, and the freedom to choose their own paths. In 1915, on a warm spring morning, Willow and Vince sat together on the porch as they had done countless times over the past 3 decades. They were older now, gray-haired and slower, but their love had only deepened with time. "31 years," Willow said softly. "Since the day you found me on that bench. Best 31 years of my life." Vince lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Mine, too. I never dreamed I could be this happy, that life could turn out so beautifully. You deserve every bit of it." Willow looked out at the land they had built together, at the house full of memories, at the corrals where their grandchildren were learning to ride just as their own children had. She thought about the terrified girl she had been, convinced she was nothing but a burden, and the woman she had become, strong, confident, loved beyond measure. "Thank you," she said to Vince, her voice thick with emotion. "For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing in me when I had no faith left. For loving me into wholeness." Vince pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, exactly as she had done 1,000 times before. "You did the same for me," he murmured. "We made each other whole." They sat together as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Two people who had found each other at the darkest moment and built a life full of light. The Double O Ranch spread out before them, a testament to love and hard work, and the simple truth that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the most desperate moments. Willow had spent years believing she was nothing but a burden to everyone she met, but Vince had shown her the truth. She was, and always had been, his greatest blessing. And in learning to accept that love, she had discovered something even more important, that she was also a blessing to herself, worthy of the good life she had built, deserving of every moment of happiness she had found. As they sat together on that spring morning, surrounded by family and legacy and the enduring promise of tomorrow, Willow knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found what she'd been searching for all along. A place to belong, a person to love, and the unshakable knowledge that she mattered. That her life had value, that she was enough. The breeze carried the scent of sage and new grass, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its cheerful song. It was an ordinary moment in an extraordinary life, and Willow treasured it with her whole heart, knowing that this simple happiness was the greatest gift of all.